Good evening, everyone, and happy holidays. Welcome to the Hans Beta House. We are so glad you have joined us this evening for Yuletide Tales. We're very excited to have Mike here tonight to share some stories, a little bit of poetry,
Whole mess of
our
stuff.
veterans. Yeah, so lots of different things. We will have some things on the TV, so if you just lean around, if you can't quite see it where you're at. And yeah, Mike, as many of you know, is a local author. He brought some of his works with him if you want to peruse those after the event. And yeah, just enjoy a little bit of holiday spirit in our 50s house here. The Hans Beta House is set up as it would have probably been in the 50s. And it's where we display some of our Cold War and the beginning of the Los Alamos town. So feel free to walk around the museum after the talk as well. And thank you again for being here this evening. And now, Mike.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you. Thank you all for coming out. Thanks a lot. One of the neat things about this house is that little picture back there with the footprints. That was Enrico Fermi and his family, and they were feeling kind of jovial one night. Got their feet in some watercolors and put their footprints on that little piece of paper, and it ended up framed and up on the wall. I thought it was kind of neat, Enrico Fermi. So I'm Mike Katko. I'm from Wilma and Joe Katko and Elvira and Max Chavez, John and Mary Katko, and the ancestors whose blood and DNA live in me today. I'm from places like Zaragoza, Spain, Marysville, California, Wichita Falls, Texas, Cheyenne, Wyoming, Denver, Colorado, and many towns in New Mexico. From the Rocky Mountains with its bone-chilling blizzards, rampaging tornadoes, hills beaten with the relentless sun, and the perfectly long, still summer nights that we have here in New Mexico. I'm from pots of pinto beans on the stove, fried potatoes, handmade tortillas, RC Cola, Kool-Aid, Frisbees, footballs, black and white TV, phonographs, real cowboys and cowgirls, and rodeos. I'm from Pittsburgh steelworkers and Colorado farmers, maids, soldiers, car mechanics, alcoholics, and the milkman. I grew up hearing the phrase, you fall down on your knees and be thankful for everything God has given you, and being grateful for the many kind and generous relatives that are sprinkled throughout my world's journey in this world. From coyotes, field mice, lizards, and snakes that we caught with our hands, chlorine-filled pools, the stars in the Milky Way in the middle of the night when you look up and see it, pocket knives in the muddy Rio Grande. I'm from mom's family speaking Spanish and my dad's family speaking Hungarian. I'm from baby Jesus, Christmas cards, Christmas carols. You dress up for church, and we pray before meals. From giants like Martin Luther King Jr., John F. Kennedy, Cesar Chavez, and Muhammad Ali. From eating out once a week, that's all, belly-holding laughter and being told to go outside and play, where we had to make up our own kind of fun. And from Dad saying whenever I disagreed with Dad, you banged your head against the wall, boy. Or whatever you say, John Alden. I never figured out who John Alden was. And up your bucket. And then Mom also, pointing with her lips, give me the thing over there. And I knew exactly what she wanted. Didn't have to tell me more. I'm from banana seat bikes, if you remember those, 57 Chevys, landing on the moon, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, Carlos Santana, the Beatles, hippies, the Vietnam War death count being shown on TV every night with Walter Cronkite. From catching the love of reading, from Dick and Jane and Dr. Seuss, The Red Badge of Courage, The Light in the Forest, Rudyard Kipling, and then also the loss of my spiritual innocence from reading the diary of Anne Frank, To Kill a Mockingbird, and Richard Brautigan's famous Trout Fishing in America. And how in such a short time, the playground lessons of sharing and caring, and the television and computers, and how those things have killed and crippled our world of imagination, and how those and driven the children indoors, away from the parks and sun and the simple fun of rolling in the grass. And I am from a whole cast of men and women from the Great Depression and World War II, the greatest generation, who looked out for each other and went out dancing on Friday, Saturday nights, cheek to cheek. And after high school, how my promising future and the landscape of the whole world was laid out before me. This is the heart of what goes into my storytelling and my writing. So welcome once again to the Bethel House, Hans Beta House. Thank you, Todd Nichols, Rachel Clay, who just left, Katie and Stephen from the archives, who let me peruse in there at will, which was, historian's gold mine. And then Wreaths Over America. We're also here. I don't know if anybody's here representing that little group, but there's going to be a Wreaths Over America, and they put wreaths on all the veterans' grave sites in the National Cemetery. So that's one of the reasons I'm here too. This is Yuletide. I thought I'd start out with kind of a history of Christmas time, and this holiday, and it helps us to remember what the big thing about this holiday. What it helps us to remember is who we are, where we come from, and whom we're connected to, including the people who served our nation. We're all connected to this town by its history. Goodness and the giving spirit were born into the human condition, and I learned that when I went into the service. I went into the military right out of high school, and I learned that there is goodness in most souls, in all souls, really. And I remember that first night in the barracks, after being yelled, we get off the bus and the TIs start yelling at you and screaming, "Hey, get in line, get in!" They start yelling, but I was used to that because I had coaches like Bob Cox and all that. It didn't matter to me. It really didn't faze me that much, but a lot of guys got shaken. And then at night, for some of these boys, and they were boys, I mean, you could hear them crying in their bunks that first night alone, away from their mom, and realizing that, holy, what did I get into here, And then after a few weeks, we got to know each other and everything. And of course, I was standing outside, and the TI saw me with my hands in my pockets, and that's a big no-no. So he started chewing me out. He goes, "You're on KP duty. You got KP duty." So over there, washing pots and pans. I mean, in the service, you watch a big kitchen full of pots and pans. You're feeding everybody. And I ended up working until 11 o'clock or 11:30 at night. And then we had an inspection the next morning. And if you didn't pass inspection, you got chewed out and had to march and guard trees and all kinds of stuff. And so by the time I got back to the bunk, I got back to my bunk, and my foot locker was squared away. My bed was made. My uniform was all folded and pressed. And I looked down the aisle, and it's pitch, it's dark, it's night, and everybody's starting to fall asleep. And all these guys were holding up their thumbs, like 5 or 6 guys there in that row, and they had done all that for me. So there was that connection of goodness and people who don't really know each other, but they knew what was happening to me, and I thought it was really neat, real touching. So the short history of Christmas, we have the Yule log, and this is the Norse people from the Norse who first started the Yule log, in Yuletide Yule log, and you burn the Yule log so Odin would come visit them. And along with that, they bring in a green Christmas tree to remind them of the future. And this happened on winter solstice. And this has happened in about the 4th century, as the Norsemen would do this. So that feeling of we're changing now into winter, and we have to survive this winter time, and let's have this little celebration with the Yule log. And that was the Norsemen. So that's kind of where the Christmas tree idea came from, because I always wondered, okay, there's baby Jesus, and he was born in a manger, and I know that story. Where did the Christmas tree come from? Where did this happen? And it looks like it came from the great Norsemen who believed in Odin, who would come visit you. And then the Romans believed in Saul, however you say it. He was a god of the sun, and this is the Roman thing of him, and image of him that's left. And they made it a point to celebrate the sun and God's soul on the 25th of December. I don't know why they picked that date, but it was in the Romans that started that date. So that's kind of like the hinge point there. And then the Dutch started doing their own thing, and they're the ones that came up with this guy that goes around and gives people gifts, and they called him Sinterklaas, Sinterklaas. and that was the Dutch in Amsterdam. And they started, there's this guy that comes around and gives good things on Christmas night. And they linked him with St. Nick, and that's where St. Nicholas comes from with Santa Claus. And then in 1822, that was in 1822, they did that. In 1863, Thomas Mass did an illustration for Harper's Magazine and made the image of Santa Claus with white beard and everything. So that's what's drifted into our history now, is the history of Christmas time and good tidings and Christmas things for kids and all of that. That was Sinterklaas. So that's a short history, a short, really condensed history. And then there was the ranch school, and we'll shift into that. The spirit of the ranch school was founded, and it emphasized outdoor character, discipline, and community. Teddy Roosevelt had a big influence on this school because one of the guys, the founders, Ashley Pond Jr., was one of the Rough Riders with Teddy Roosevelt. He contracted typhoid or I forget which disease, and it almost killed him. Polio, was it? Was it Ashley Pond? I'm not sure which one. Ashley Pond Jr. Yeah. So it really had an effect on him, but you tough those things out. You just get tough, and outdoors is one of the things you do that with. The idea of self-reliance was embedded in the school, and I remember that song, that poet, that epitaph that he read. It's not the critic who counts. Who points out the doer of deeds and how they could have done it better. The credit belongs with the man in the arena, or woman, who strives valiantly, who spends himself in a worthy cause. And that idea of, you can pull yourself by your bootstraps. I remember we had a coach, one of the best coaches we ever had here in Los Alamos, Coach Peter Meyer, and he was a football coach. And I remember before one game, he was looking around. We were in the locker room there, and he was a great guy. He was just a great coach, and he just would say these speeches. And he came and he saw we were kind of down, didn't know if we were facing some pretty tough opponents. I don't remember who. And he came in and he goes, you guys hold your head up. Hold your head up. He goes, there's 1,000 kids in this school, and I only count 40 boys in this room. He goes, you're representing your school, you're representing your family, you're here with this uniform representing yourself more than anything. So hold your head up with dignity. And it just stuck with me after that, that how much we represent other people in our lives. We're not just alone in the world. And the ranch school represented kind of that thing for me. The handmade gifts, music around the fire, riding in the snow to deliver holiday cheer, dolls, stacking blocks, and handmade rocking horses. Those were the things back then. The ranch school Christmas represented simplicity, kindness, and self-reliance. It was kind of neat. And this is the big house, which is not Fuller Lodge. This was the building that was over in this area on the corner where Hall's Shoe Store used to be. I don't know what's there now, but it's not the lodge. If you stand in front of the lodge and you look over to your left, that's what used to be there, the big house. And on this back porch, that's where the boys slept year round. And I brought a Hudson Bay blanket here, and it's laid out on there. That's what they had to cover themselves with. And some mornings they wake up and there'd be snow on their blanket. It's some different world back then, but that was the ranch school. And here's Ashley Pond Jr., the founder. And he came out with a bunch of people that he knew, and he wanted to start the Parrito Club, which was going to be a rich rancher's place where you could come and hunt and all of that stuff in the winter, in the summer and in hunting season. And that kind of failed. And he brought his family with him. In the back seat there is Peggy Pond Church. And so he ended up building, after the hunting lodge failed, then he got the ranch school and opened the ranch school in 1917. He hired A.J. Connell to do the day-to-day running of the place along with the ranch. And sometimes the kids didn't go home for Christmas. Some of the parents ended up in renting houses or apartments in Santa Fe, and then they would come up and visit the kids on Christmas Day. And some of the kids remember that he would give out simple gifts. One of the things that they remembered fondly was he gave all the kids ice skates. And they loved it, and he taught them how to skate, and they remembered that the rest of their lives, and they skated the rest of their lives. Fun pastime, skating. There's simple, practical gifts. And then here's Peggy Pond Church, and this is her on her own horse, and she's very young here. A longtime resident and chronologist for Los Alamos, she helped preserve the emotional landscape of the early Los Alamos through her writing and her poetry. The high plateau, this is one of her quotes, the high plateau has a silence so deep, it becomes its own kind of song. And then she also said, life here teaches us to look for meaning in small, shining moments. Like this letter to Virginia. Back then people wrote letters, and they were amazing when you go through the archives and you see some of these letters that people wrote to each other. One of them was, she wrote to her friend Virginia Worth. And Virginia her first husband died of some disease, and then she married another guy, John Wyberson, and he went to World War II, and in 1944 he was killed. And so she was good friends with Peggy Pond Church, and Peggy wrote this letter to her. Letter to Virginia. Do you remember those days, Virginia, when we were young and time was innocent, when the ripe world flowered around us? Disaster was a seed whose spear had not thrust through the quiet earth. We lay at night embraced in the peace of our husbands. We gave birth to our children. The days were luminous. The vines were sweet above the porches. At dusk we walked among the moonflowers. The children cried at bedtime. After they slept, we sang. We and the young men together gathered around the piano and the firelight of the fireplace. How young we were then, and how certain we were of us having a happy ending. But time split like a dry seed. The sleeping gods woke. The dead myths came alive. Lightning fell out of heaven and clashed amongst us. We found life is not what we dream. But I shall remember you forever, Virginia, the day we stood together in the garden, and you knew that your love must die. I shall remember how you stood in the wind like a flag unbeaten, like the figurehead of a ship that faces the waves' crash, proud and unvanquished, grown to the stature of a woman. The past fell behind you like a discarded plaything. You gathered your children's hands and marched toward the future. Peggy Pond, July 1944, to Virginia. What a sweet letter to someone who had suffered so, but she saw her as a brave woman. And there were lots of them like that. Her reflections fit beautifully with the themes of memory, love, and the holiday spirit. She also was a great horsewoman. She was outdoorsy, tough, and she was furious when her father opened the school for boys, because she could outride, outhide any of the guys that came up here. A lot of the rich boys that came up here, they all got assigned a horse, and she could outride them all over the place. So she was mad at her dad for just not allowing her to go to school here and ride horses, but she wasn't allowed. And she reminds me a lot of my grandmother. And my grandmother was from that era. 1910, we have a picture of her. She worked in the coal mines, and she was Native American, but she was very stoic and very hard-pressed woman. And I remember one time she had moved to Denver, and I was there with my cousin Randy. And she used to watch, we just could have the black and white TV on, and the whole house had all the lights turned off to save money. So you didn't have any lights on except for the TV. And we're sitting there with her, and we're watching some movie, and she goes, "Did you guys hear that in the backyard? Did you hear that?" And we stopped and we listened, and we were young, 8 or 9. And she goes, "Somebody's out there. Somebody's in the back." And then she goes, "You stay right here, don't move." And she comes out with the biggest gun. I didn't even know it was in the house. And she goes, come on with me, let's go, guys. And she's like this, and she's walking, and we're standing, Grandma, look over there, look over there. And she looks, there's nobody, Grandma, there's nobody. And we go to the back kitchen, and then we go down to the floor. And he goes, look over there, Mike, you go in that hallway and look over there. You have the gun. I was scared to death, and we went out in the backyard, and we got out to the backyard, and she's looking around, I have a gun, who's here? I'm going to shoot you if I see you, And we just hear this pattering going down the alley in the background of Denver. Don't mess with Grandma. True story, true story. So that's what Peggy Pond Church reminds me of her. And she does kind of look like my grandma. Now, in World War I, is hope in a dark world, love, kindness, and giving. The Christmas truce of 1914 happened. During the lull in the Battle of Ypres, a very nasty war battle, probably the worst battle ever, one of the worst wars ever, because of the amount of death and blown apart parts of people were just blown apart, and it was. But I'd like to stop here for a moment, and during this time, during the battle, I want you to, when I say, we'll close our eyes and pretend that you're a boy, 18, 19 years old, in a trench. And you've been in a trench. And some of the people that you know died, and they're still laid out in no man's land. There's horses that have died, and they're laid out in no man's land. There's death all around you. And then Christmas Eve happens. And you're sitting there thinking of home and thinking of all these things. And then if you could close your eyes now and imagine you hear this sound from the trench across in no man's land. And then from the American side, you hear, Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright, round yon And then all of a sudden, boys from both sides climbed out of their trenches. It's the universal sign of peace, song of peace. And they climbed out of their trenches on Christmas Day and went across no man's land and exchanged gifts. They traded helmets and cigarettes, and they paused in the middle of war to celebrate Christmas. And it's a true story, the truce of 1914. It really happened just that way. And that was Chris Stevens. Thank you, Chris. Beautiful. Now, the story of Silent Night's kind of interesting, too. A priest and an organist got together, and they were in Offenburg, or I can't ever pronounce it, Offenburg, Austria, near Salzburg, or one of the big Vienna. And the organist and the priest were together in the afternoon on Christmas Eve, and they have to do Christmas Eve Mass. which is like the Super Bowl of church, it's Christmas Eve Mass, And so the organist gets together and he goes over to the organ, he starts pumping it, nothing. He starts hitting the keys, nothing. They look around the back and they see that mice have eaten through the bellows on the organ. What are they going to do now? Christmas is moving really fast now. So the organist says, well, I can play a guitar. I got a guitar. I can play a guitar. He goes, well, all I have is this. I don't know what we're going to play. He goes, I have this poem. Can you make a song out of that? He goes, yeah, I think so. So when the congregation came, they stopped and he played Silent Night on his guitar. And forevermore, that song has gone on. And that was from 1300. Now, the one thing about this war, World War I, is there were 323,000 casualties on the American side, not including the Russians and everybody else that was involved. There's 9 million, I think, or 10 million people that actually died during that war, World War I. But the saddest part for me, guys dying is really sad, but they also killed 8 million horses, and many of them died afterwards from shell shock, and they just had to shoot them. They were just done. And so a bunch of veterinarians and doctors got together and made the symbol of a horse, lined up, and they took a picture in honor the noble horse for its role in World War I. And then this is a Christmas card of the lodge. It's finally built in 1928, Fuller Lodge, and that's the original Fuller Lodge. It doesn't have the extension and any wings on it yet, but that was the original Fuller Lodge. And it was the theme in World War II was longing, sacrifice, and connection. Remember, these guys had just come through Depression, the Great Depression, and Los Alamos became central to the effort of World War II because they brought the bomb here, and all kinds of scientists, big scientists, world-renowned scientists, but it was all in secrecy and the pressure to get the bomb built. So you can imagine that we're in a race here, and if Hitler gets the bomb, it's over. And we knew that Heisenberg, on his side, was building it and knew how to do it. And he was one of the biggest physicists alive during that time. So families were separated, and building the bomb was heightened, and there was this longing for home. And Bing Crosby came up, and he came up, and one of the big songs back then was White Christmas. And his version of White Christmas, you have to imagine that you're back then, once again. Let me see if I can do this. I don't have to do it, but it's kind of neat. And his version of White Christmas was going out over the radios. If you remember, okay, and this is what you heard on the radio. We didn't have TVs, and so people only heard this, and it became a nationwide hit right away. And you imagine you're a soldier, and you're going to war, and you hear this.
Just like the ones I used to know, where the treetops glisten and children listen to hear sleigh bells in the snow.
When you're homesick and you hear that, that's kind of neat to think of it back then, and you're alone in your bunk. Christmas at wartime, they decorated their barracks. They had small gifts from the Red Cross, and letters from home were just treasured by the soldiers and many of the guys that were there. Now this is Edith Barwick. She later became Edith Haig. She was here with the original set of wax that first came here in 1944. And she was the wax of the West Wing. They were crazy. Edith has all kinds of stories, and she's passed away now. But her son was Bill Haig, and his mom, and she was a tall woman, 5'10", 5'11". And one time she worked in she was first assigned to work in the warehouse here with the building of the bomb. And she was in the warehouse, and they had this big long wall, and you could swing this ladder over to get this one part. And this one scientist came in and says, "I need that part way up there." She said, "Okay." So she swung the ladder over there and started climbing. And while she climbed, the guy goosed her. So she jumped off that ladder and grabbed the axe off the wall for fires and started chasing him around, swinging, trying to hit him for real with an axe, And she was just missing him, and he ran out and just left. And he never came back to the warehouse. So you can't fire wax, soldiers. So what they did is move her. They ended up moving her to the building and contracts department back then during the war. And she ended up staying there till she retired. And she was one of the last people, and she was deeply involved with negotiating and securing and selecting contractors for TA-55, which is still there today. She worked her way through 4 administrations at the lab. She passed away in 2004. Her son, Bill Haig, sent me some of these pictures. Sent me those ones. And this is Bill and Belinda and his wife. They donated lots of items to the Los Alamos archives. And Todd knows. Bill Haig is a senior. Bill Haig Sr., Bill's dad, was a close friend of my father's. They both were from Pittsburgh, PA, home and miners and steel workers, coal miners and steel workers. So they related a lot to each other. And Edith Barwick Haig told him the story of her ride up to Los Alamos, and she was from Kentucky, Kentucky, I think, and she got on the train there, and they had put all the drapes up so you couldn't see out, and so people couldn't see in. And on the train ride, they kept picking people up, and some of these people were girls from New York City, girls from Chicago, inner city girls. And they said when they finally got to Lamy, they got off the train at Lamy, New Mexico. And she said a bunch of them started crying and got back on the train. "I'm done, I'm not going." They had to get the MPs to pull a few of them off. And they cried all the way over to 109 East Palace Avenue. And they got there and they met Dorothy McKibben, the gatekeeper of Los Alamos, who met everyone, processed everyone who was coming up to Los Alamos. So then they got on the bus, and then they got on the bus and started going up the cliff route. And I mean, you're just looking straight down back then. It was just a carve in the rock. And they started crying again and screaming, "Oh, I can't do this, I can't do this." He said, so it was quite a ride up to Los Alamos that Edith remembers. And this is her posing, of course. And she ended up marrying Bill Haig. Bill Haig was my size. He's about 5'6", and she's 5'10", so there's that discrepancy there. But they loved each other all the way till the end. And he was such a nice guy. He was just great. And then and that song was the anthem of the homesick troops. And and then before she married Bill, she had 3 marriage proposals before accepting the one from Big Bill Haig, who was much smaller than her. And they went, and how they got married is they decided, he asked her, "Can we go on a date?" She said, "Sure." He says, "Where do we want to go?" "We want to go to Santa Fe." So they started drinking in the morning, and then in the afternoon they got married, and they've been married ever since. So they got married on their first date, which was kind of crazy, And then the other song that came out during then, and this was towards the end, this was at the end of the war, 1944, and one of the songs that came out that everybody loved, and the war's ending, and everybody's just thinking, "I just want to go home."
I'll be home for Christmas. You can plan on me. Please have snow and mistletoe and presents by the tree.
So this is written for a soldier. A soldier wrote this sending it home that he's going to be home sometime. The next one is an interesting story. This is Richard Feynman. Now, Richard Feynman was one of the original, he was a complete genius. Oppenheimer personally asked him to come and work on the bomb. He was just genius. And I think there's some more chairs, if you want chairs. There's some people back there. There's some there. So he was just born genius with mathematical equations and that kind of stuff. Now, his greatest love, the love of his life, was Arlene. And they got married. And then she got sick. And so he arranged for, in the Army people got together and they were allowed to send her here to Albuquerque. So they brought her out to Albuquerque and she got put in called the Army Sanatorium in Albuquerque. So on weekends, Saturday nights, he'd borrow this car, Klaus Fuchs' car, and drive down to Albuquerque to be with his wife for just the weekend, because he was working on the bomb, and this is towards the end of the war, 1944. And then in February, she dies. And he's right in the middle of the bomb. When she died, it devastated him. He came back and just put a cot in his office, and that's where he stayed until the bomb was built in July. And he just stayed in that room, refused to go anyplace else, because he wanted to get the bomb done. This is him visiting her basically on her deathbed. And then the other thing about him is he was quite a card. In the movie, Oppenheimer movie, if you haven't seen it, he's the one playing bongos when they're getting ready to blow up the bomb, Trinity site, He was, all these guys were like 20s, early 20s and late 20s, So they're having fun and working hard at doing what they're doing. And they're all geniuses. It's amazing that this happened, from reality to happened, from theory to reality is a big leap. After the war, and the other thing about him is he thought that there was not enough security, and he got in a thing with Edward Teller, and Teller, he walked into Teller's office, and he just had all this stuff, scribbles and stuff, all over his desk, and he goes, Edward, if somebody comes in there, they're going to see all this stuff. He goes, no. At night I put it away and I put it in my drawer on my desk, so nobody's ever going to get to it. And I'm pretty good with security. And so he talked to the guard at night and got him to let him in. And this was before his wife got sick. And he reached up underneath the desk and pulled out all his stuff and put it on top of his desk. And when he came in the morning, all his stuff was spread out. And he goes walking by the office. He goes, hey, Ed, how's it going? And Ed goes, I don't know, somebody got my stuff. It was me. I'm doing it. So he was constantly doing practical jokes like that. And so after the war, the FBI starts getting closer to the little weasel rat fink mother chicken Klaus the coward Fuchs, and they tried using him to throw off the FBI. He tried using Feynman to throw the FBI off, telling them that he used to borrow his car and go to Albuquerque every weekend. And they think he was giving secrets away then, and then and in meeting with Russian spies. The truth was he used the car to go to Albuquerque to visit his wife. And then Fuchs also told them that he was also always breaking into people's offices, getting all the secrets, so he knew everything. And so the FBI started to look at Feynman, and that's when Klaus Fuchs ran to Russia, and he ended up safe and sound in Russia and died, old man, Ratfink. But and then there were other spies. There were other spies. There were 3 other people here, and that were involved with for giving Russia the bomb. But that's for another story. One of my other talks that Todd will probably have to. Okay, now this next one's kind of interesting. This is Betty Peters. Hers was the class of 1946. She was present here when the war ended. She graduated in 1946 here in Los Alamos, the first class after the war. She was a junior in 45 when it actually ended. She's told the story many times that when they finally learned that the bomb had blown up and it was announced and everybody knew about it, she said the residents of Los Alamos came out, were driving up and down the streets with their honking the horns and banging pots and pans, and everybody was happy, happy, happy. And her class was one that gave us the name the Hilltoppers. They christened us as the Hilltoppers. And then she also was the one who came up with the song, the song for the class. Go Toppers, go for the green and for the gold. I don't know the rest. That's as far as I can go with that. I can, I can do that part. That was and to we go fight wind. Okay. Now she married Armand, and they had 6 children. One of them's here, Pat, one of my good friends. Now, one of her oldest, Michael, he got sick with an infection, and then the infection later turned to pneumonia, and then he died, and he was in junior high. 600 kids signed a petition to have the gymnasium named after him. And on June 4th, 1968, the family and the school board got together, and the matter was resolved, and it's been Brousseau Gym ever since that. This is just one of the things that makes us who we are in this small community and who we're connected to. And small town values and small town traditions. And I think we need to remember that, especially during Christmas. Now, who remembers this stuff? Door-to-door caroling? This is stuff that's gone away. It's just gone away. I remember it happening all the time. And then aluminum Christmas trees, like the one in here. There's one of the old Christmas trees that we had. I was sitting there digging in the archives and looking at all the newspapers. There's all kinds of newspapers. Yeah, we'd always wait for it to change colors. Oh, it's green. I like that when it's red. I like when it's red. But anyway, it was a big thing for us, Now, one of the things that happened. This is the Alamos Scientific Laboratory Community News. That was the name of the newspaper, Lassell News. And in there, it's Merry Christmas to All. This is dated December 18th, 1959. And the Westervelt brothers singing Merry Christmas. And Jeff was one of my friends when I taught down in Santa Fe. And he's the little guy. And, there was a whole bunch of them. But that's them, and Jeff was one of my good friends then. Christmas caroling, common thing back then. And then came the Korean conflict, the Forgotten War. This was really crazy, and this is when most people viewed it as a police operation. We're just keeping the communism from spreading. But one of the things about it is that in this picture, you're seeing the men marching back from the Chosin Reservoir. Now, it was one of the coldest winters on record, below 0 day and night. So a lot of these guys lost fingers, lost toes, were frozen to death in their foxholes trying to march out. What had happened is the Americans got involved. They made a big push from the North Koreans, pushed them almost to the border of China, and there's a big reservoir there. Mao Zedong said, "You're not coming in China," and he sent a bunch of Chinese, and they surrounded the army. And so the army was surrounded by the Chosin Reservoir. Hampton Sides wrote a great book that talks about this battle, one of the bloodiest and worst battles ever. MASH, remember that movie, that show was popularized the war, probably made it known to people because people just forgot about it. Sun Tzu in his book, The Art of War, states that when you are surrounded, every inch of ground you gain is desperate ground. Now there's one guy in this battle in particular, General Chesty Puller. And he had one shining moment in the battle, and he is credited for giving the breakout push that got them out of being surrounded, and he saved a bunch of kids, a bunch of soldiers, kids. And one of his lines is, and it's always said different ways, but what I heard is he goes, "All right, boys, we got the enemy behind us, enemy on the side of us, enemy on that side of us, and the enemy in front of us. So they can't get away from us now. Charge!" And they busted through this one line, and they made it all the way back. But they were just picked apart all the way back to South Korea. But and they had great Silver Bells was one song from there, and also Nat King Cole singing the Christmas song, "Chestnuts roasting on an open fire," and they of course, soldiers, everybody loves that song. And then going through that newspaper, I came across, now this is building of the bridge that goes over the Ottawa Bridge. I think what's it called? The Omega Bridge. The Omega Bridge, and this is dated May 1st, 1951, and they're putting the last piece in there. And it's still there today, and now we have the bridge since 1951. So you can take it easy, Jerry. They're not going to put you to work. and so that was when they built the bridge, and we've had it there ever since. But one thing, and then there was this little article I came across. It was in the newspaper, and you look at newspapers and you try and see how they covered the Korean War. Hardly anybody talked about it because it was just supposed to be, we're just keeping the communists out of South Korea. But it was a war, a great big war, and there was a little article in there. And it said, the parents of Richard Allen Bateman were notified of the death of their son, Lieutenant Bateman. He was killed in action over North Korea in October. That was it. And it was in this newspaper that I just showed you. And he was a hero, a real hero. He was a pilot. And he was Distinguished Flying Cross, the Air Medal. He had a Purple Heart, which means if he already had the Purple Heart, he'd been injured before. And he went out in another flight. He was a pilot, a dang good pilot, they said. Combat action ribbon, just look at that. Big hero. And he was shot down, and they put an article about this big in the paper about him, and that was it. And I just think of, I just considered how their parents must have felt. His parents must have felt that first Christmas in 1951. It almost makes you cry for their pain. I never heard of such a loss. And then, animals have spirits. I believe it. That they can be heroes. Well, in the Korean War, we meet Sergeant Reckless. Sergeant Reckless was loaded with ammunition. He took it to the front lines, and then he'd pick up wounded and carry them back. And this went on. And he did it for 51 trips up to the front in a heavy battle. They said they could watch him, and whenever it got really heavy, the bombing and the shelling, he would crouch down with the ammo and get up to the roof, and then going back with the wounded, he did the same thing. He even crouched down to go under barbed wire. He did 51 trips. At the end of 48 hours, he finally collapsed, and they found 2 bullet holes in him. And he survived. And he lived out the war, and the soldiers loved him. They loved Sergeant Reckless. And believe it or not, he's buried between Secretariat and Man of War in Kentucky. And the soldiers believe that Sergeant Reckless was the greatest horse ever born. Oh, wow. True story. True hero. Sergeant Reckless. Love it. Who remembers this stuff? Silver tinsel. And the Christmas Club accounts. Now, we'd never had a Christmas Club account, but we had to, but you would open this up, your parents would open it for you so you could have your own little Christmas card account. Anytime you earned any money, even if it's a quarter, you could bring it to the bank and put it in there, and then you save it all summer, and then just before Christmas, you could get it out and buy whatever you want. Parents would, if you had good parents or nice parents, they'd let you buy whatever. and then silver tinsel was invented then, and they had to stop making silver tinsel because they remembered they found out it was made with lead, and so we got to stop that. Like lead paint. And I remember one time Pat saw me and I was misbehaving. And he goes, "Well, you have to excuse him. He was eating tinsel over Christmas time. That's what makes him go crazy." Yeah. And then who remembers making those loops, those construction paper loops where you cut a strip and then you get the Elmer's glue, and most of the kids ate the Elmer's glue. They love the Elmer's glue, and I just like to put it on my fingers because it made them real hard, like Superman fingers, and then it's fun to peel it off. And but you had to sit there and just make these loops one after the other. You'd make 50 miles of loops because if you decorated your tree, they had these contests back then in each classroom, and each class, the best decorated classroom would get to spend more time for recess, which I think the teachers liked that more than the kids, but but it ended up being a great thing to, I mean, I hated doing it because I'm just too ADD. After the second one, I was ready to, and then, but the other two was the fruitcakes. They put liquor on them. They wait till it was made and put it on, and then you put liquor on it. And I think they did a study, and they found out that the kids that like fruitcake the most, they're the ones that ended up becoming alcoholics. But I don't know if it's totally true, but anyway, I haven't seen a real fruitcake with liquor in a long time. I don't think I've seen it since I was a kid.
They don't last too long.
And then White Rock Shopping Mall. Yeah, White Rock Shopping Mall. Now this is going to take a down memory lane here. This was this is before 1967. This is my Uncle Max's, which is the quick stop now. Here's number 4, Highway 4, and then this is Rover Boulevard. Remember the Peak? I don't know if anybody remembers the Peak. There's a picture of the Peak. And here's Uncle Max's. Now notice here, there's no rock. In this corner was Whackers. That was the food store. Over here was 7-Eleven, and right in between that was Cy Wanik's pharmacy. So my Uncle Max owned this gas station. And he got together with Cy Wanik. And he said, hey, let's call Paul Parker, big construction guy in town. And he goes, let's see if he'll dig us up a rock and put it right there. And then I'll paint it white and we'll have a white rock. And Uncle Max did this. And so they said, okay. He goes, hey, can you do that for us, Paul? So Paul did it. Put the rock there, moved it there just the way Uncle Max wanted it. He went down the street and got some white paint and painted it white. And it was the White Rock. Now we have a white rock for White Rock. And then at night, there was a little place down here called the Pub. Well, the local watering hole. Well, the guys got out one night and they got some pink paint. And while Uncle Max was sleeping, they went out and put pink polka dots on it. And Uncle Max came in the morning and drove up. You done! He was really mad, so he got some more paint, painted back over it, and that started the tradition of painting the White Rock. So, and everybody does it and done it ever since. And I think they did a core sample, and they took it out, and there's like 5 inches of paint on that thing now. It used to be a rock this big, now it's like this big. And so Uncle Max did that, Uncle Max Chavez, yeah, so that was kind of neat. That was kind of, and I couldn't believe it when I found that picture before the White Rock was there. And we moved there right after this picture. And then we talk about World War II and the greatest generation. And why are they called that? Well, they lived in momentous times in which theory became reality, the bomb, industrial shifts, people moved from farms to suburbs. That was the big transition. The work ethic, they had a work ethic like you wouldn't believe. Hard work was a badge of honor to them. To work hard with your hands and your back, that was a badge of honor. Frugality, you do without for the good of others. You conserve gas and all for the good of others. Saving for a rainy day, sharing. Because of the Great Depression, they learned that you shared with your neighbors. They had sacrifice and honor. The Battle of the Bulge, D-Day, Iwo Jima. Steve Stoddard was at the Battle of the Bulge. He became Senator Steve Stoddard, and he was injured during that. And that's why he had a limp the rest of his life. And I remember him always with a limp. But he was at the Battle of the Bulge. Joe Bologna was working on the bomb here as an analytical chemist. And in 1944, they let him know that his brother was killed in North Africa. And Bob Cox was one of our greatest coaches. He's in the Coaching Hall of Fame because he won so many championships, so many state championships and district championships. Masterful coach, especially back then. When we got to him, he just said, Katko, put your nose in there. Quit messing around. And then Secadino Sandoval, his dad was here as a construction worker and a carpenter, really good carpenter. And Secadino got a job when he got out of high school, but he was here in high school, but he didn't graduate till the 50s. So he was really little when Pat's mom was here. And George Otto Biarchi, he hit the beaches on D-Day. And he followed the troops onto there. Now at Judy's 70th, I shouldn't say it. Judy's birthday party. Erase, sorry, delete that. And at Judy's birthday party, we found they took all his medals and his awards and they put them on the tables there at her birthday party. And I looked at him and I saw that he had a bronze star. And you can only get that by doing some meritorious thing in a battle. And we didn't even know that at the time. Remember, it was so crazy. And that was a lot about that generation. They never blew themselves up at all. You know, and he just put that in his drawer and forgot about it. But he was a great man. And then Dante Susco, he talked real loud. He always was, what was that? Well, he was a tank commander at the Battle of the Bulge. And all these tankers, they can't hear a thing after serving for like a year. And then, of course, Bill Hudson up in the corner. He was our swimming coach and great coach. And Bill was at the Battle of Iwo Jima, and he was on the first wave. And 39 days later, he got off the front, and he was on the battle the entire time. He got Silver Cross, General Cross, well decorated. On the last day of battle, the Japanese was throwing a hand grenade at him, and he shot the guy, and the grenade landed next to him, and it put shrapnel all over his body. But he lived, and he was coming home in a troop ship, and a medical ship, and they stole all the stuff that he had. He had all, and I brought I guess it's still in my car, but I have an original samurai sword. And it's still in my car, and I think it's unlocked. Yeah, I think it's unlocked. But they got it from those battles. You know where I am. And he had all kinds of stuff. He had a flag and all kinds of stuff. And then when they gave him a bunch of drugs to knock him out, all those guys stole all his stuff. And so he came home with just hardly anything. But you know. Idalia and Jim Bridge. Jim Bridge was one of my best friends in high school was Joe Bridge, his son, and that was his mom and his wife. They met each other here while building the bomb. There's Willie Martinez. That's Tommy Martinez's dad. He was at the Battle of Chosin Reservoir, and Korean veteran. He was good friends with my dad, and my dad was a Korean veteran and Vietnam veteran. And then Roger and Jane Rasmussen. Now Roger and Jane died before Roger, and Roger died just a few years ago. He was here when they built the bomb. He went down to the Trinity site, and he witnessed the bomb exploding at Trinity. Here's an actual example of a samurai sword. This is an actual samurai sword taken from a soldier at battle. And look at the action on that thing. And the archives let me bring it here. And you can look at it, but you know, it's a real artifact that we got. It's really neat. You can come and look at it. It's really cool. So anyway, Roger, when he passed away, he was the last one from here to witness the Trinity bombing. Who remembers this stuff? Here's another. They're gone. We used to get these Christmas catalogs, and we go to friends' house. I remember sitting down with Leroy and just circling, going, oh God, I gotta get. Oh my God, I gotta get that. Oh, I wish I could have that. I mean, we spent hours going through these Christmas catalogs. I don't know if anybody in here remembers those, but boy, what a lost tradition that was. I mean, we imagined having fun for hours just looking at the catalog. It was just fun as heck. I want this, I want that. And then these three women were probably, they were best friends. And Peggy Ponchers is credited as the first lady of New Mexico poetry. She came, she wrote the House at Ottawee Bridge, which honors Edith Warner, the woman at Ottawee Bridge. I call her the first hippie of New Mexico. And she moved down there, and she farmed, and the person who lived with her was Tilano. Tilano was a Native American from the San Ildefonso Pueblo. And he was a very calm and gentle person. And he helped her build up her house, and he helped her fish and do all kinds of things. And he was a really good man. And he was in his 60s when she met him. And then by the time he was in his 80s, Edith was passing away. And Dorothy McKibben, of course, the gatekeeper of Los Alamos, and they were great friends, and and um, and, and they're just they led such fascinating lives. Now going back, they Edith Warner at her house, she made this chocolate cake that was out of this world, they said. And the people that visited her house were Enrico Fermi, Niels Bohr, and Robert Oppenheimer. They had a standing invitation to come there anytime for dinner and then later have cake. And it was just a joyous occasion to go to Edith Warner's house at the crossing on Ottery Bridge. And it's still there today. You can see remnants of the house. And who remembers this stuff that's not long anymore? Christmas store displays. Remember how you just walk by, that was a night out, just going by wow, look at that thing, and just looking at these storefronts, all decorated, all the stuff inside with moving trains and little cars and just all this stuff. I thought it was fun, going window shopping. And then tree flocking. You guys remember this stuff where it came in a spray can, you spray it on trees and it looked like fake snow? Well, it turns out that it was made with asbestos. It's like, so they had to quit that. So they quit that, but no trees burned up, So that ended the flocking of trees. And I don't know how our generation survived. I don't know how I got this old. This stuff that was just out there all around. It's like they were trying to kill us. Okay, the Vietnam era, and then we started the Vietnam era. And during that time, Bob Hope was out and he was doing his Christmas Day, and this is Christmas Day, and Bob Hope's up on stage. I cut him off, but I wanted to show more of the troops. And this is on Christmas Day, and he's entertaining them and giving them, with humor and all of that. And then right around the Cuban Missile Crisis, this song came out with Andy Williams. Do you hear what I hear? And that was the song that came out then. But during the Cuban Missile Crisis, my dad was sent on alert. And back then, when a soldier was sent on alert, they left the house and they had to go to their duty station. And they were there, and you didn't know if they were going to come back, or if they were going to go to war, or if it was just a short time thing. So it was a very scary moment during that time, and I wrote a poem about how I felt back then. It's called Green Paper, and I remember we had now when I was in elementary, and I went to a Catholic school for 1 year, and we met, and I had for a teacher Sister Marie Liam. And she was the best teacher I ever had in the world. And many times we'd pull up they got paid nothing to teach. I got paid nothing to teach. She got less than that. And I remember, and this is in Wyoming, and we pull up on a bus and we're coming up to the school, and she's out there sweeping the snow off the basketball court so we can play basketball. She was that kind of a person. Loved her. So anyway, also in the war, the guys found out, the guys that went on bivouac, who went out in a recon or whatever, that if you carried these steno books, and I don't know if you remember the steno books, they opened this way, and they had the wire across this side, and they were green paper, and they had a red line down the middle of them. And I remember a lot of the soldiers liked to carry those because they held up in backpacks and stuff. They held up out in the jungle. And so they carried those to write letters home. And there was one soldier that wrote home to his son who was in our class. And Sister Marie Liam would always read those letters and to us from the war. And so I wrote this song. I wrote this poem in my book. It's called Green Paper. The dark of dawn was the best time to sit with my dad. During the war, he would dress in his clean, worn green fatigues. I would smell his coffee brewing from my warm bed and pounce when I heard the stirring of cream and sugar in his ceramic coffee cup. I would meet him at the kitchen table with my box of Frosted Flakes. He would read the Cheyenne Tribune, and I would read the box of Frosted Flakes. He would rest his Marlboro cigarette in a thin tin ashtray. Sometimes he would talk to me, but often his only words were, "You done, boy? Put that bowl in the sink." I always felt proud and privileged to spend time in the secret world of men. Those moments were short, but they lifted me all day. One morning, our routine changed due to circumstance. Dad wasn't reading the Tribune that morning. He sat and drank his coffee, stared and smoked at the table, and flipped his lighter open and closed, open and closed. At school the day before, Sister Marie Liam had read to our class the green paper letter smudged with red dirt. The letter Mr. Saviano had sent, the one he wrote from the war. Sister Marie Liam would pause many times to cry. Tears fell out the letter, which she would wipe dry against her black cassock. It left a little red mark there on her dress. Tommy Saviano was absent that day in 1968. We just all stared at his empty desk as she read. In the world of men and war, men have to die. And our beautiful Sister Marie would read and cry. The gray cloud from my dad's Marlboro drifted up over the table and formed a small river of smoke that would find its way down the hallway. That evening, I imagined the red blood on my dad's worn green fatigues. Frightened, I offered a tight-fisted prayer to heaven. I prayed to God that the big plane with the growling propellers would never take my dad away. And I wished that Mr. Saviano would send our class one more letter. That one more letter would come and find its way to our beautiful Sister Marie Liam, and she would not cry. That I would never again see smudged red dirt on folded green paper. It was what I wrote for Mr. Saviano during Vietnam, and Tommy. So, where was I? Do you hear what I hear? So the day, and then also during that time, Martin Luther King was shot, John Kennedy was shot, Robert Kennedy was assassinated. There were riots in cities all over. I couldn't play with Billy Harrison after they killed Martin Luther King Jr. Billy was black, and he was my best friend from kindergarten. And his mom told him he couldn't play with me anymore because I was white after they killed Martin Luther King. I didn't understand that. I didn't understand why my dad couldn't go downtown in Denver with his green fatigues because they would call him a baby killer. But then there was 1969, and we landed on the moon, and there was Woodstock. So the Christmas, and then the war ended. And John Lennon wrote a song called Happy Christmas, the War is Over. And that song, so this is Christmas, and at the end, and the war's over. And so it's kind of a nice ending to the ending of the war. Now, I like to honor soldiers because that's who I grew up with, and then I was a soldier too. And veterans and their Yuletides, honoring those who served is part of the reason for doing this tonight. I wanted to acknowledge the profound emotional weight holidays hold for veterans, the long memories, the loss, the camaraderie. Veterans often embody holiday themes in sacrifice of service. Soldiers serving rations. This was painted by Norman Rockwell, and it's of an Italian girl after they blew up Anzio in that town. And there was a girl who was shivering cold and hadn't eaten for days and days, and the soldier gave him his rations and her jacket. And they took a picture of her, and Norman Rockwell painted it. And so this really happened. And that girl, I don't know what happened to her, but a soldier gave her his meal for the day, and that's her saying a prayer of gratitude to God for giving her something to eat and a warm jacket to wear for a few moments. Soldiers always did that. They donate toys back home, communities writing letters, assembling care packages. The holidays remind us that humanity persists even in conflict. And I don't know if people remember her, Ray Douglas. She was a lady who actually lived here in Los Alamos, and she would collect toys and pile them up out at the horse place that we have out here. What's it called? The stable area. And there's a big stable barn out there, and she would pile all this stuff up during the year and just have all these things, cans of soup and all kinds of stuff. And then on Christmas Day, she would pile all this stuff with her dog into her white van and go up into Truchas and Mora and pass out all these stuff that she had collected during the year. And she did this for years and years, 20 years I think I read. And so she's an example of an ordinary American doing an extraordinary thing during this time of Christmas of giving, alone with her van. Amazing. And then who remembers Rock'em Sock'em Robots? I sure do. I could hardly wait till someone got one of these. We weren't going to get one because they were kind of expensive. But I remember we go over there, and the thing was, the whole point is to knock his block off, right? And we went over there. One kid guy, I forget, Robert Gore or somebody got it. And we were all over there that day, and we all went over there to play Rock'em Sock'em Robots. And the thing was with these things is the blue guy seemed to be the one that could knock the block off, and the red guy, you just had to touch him and his block would pop off. So nobody wanted to be the red guy. And then easy bake ovens, and it was like a light, a regular light bulb in there with tin foil, and then you could mix up this stuff. I don't know what it was, flour and sugar and some yeast and lots of sugar, and you put it in this thing, and then you wait for the light bulb to heat up the thing that you just mixed together and put in a pan. And he'd wait forever, and they'd come out, and it was maybe this big, and the sister would slice off some pieces, and you got like one little taste, and it wasn't worth the wait. and then, so this is Dorothy Pond. Peggy Pond and her sister Dorothy. This is way back, probably 1914, 1910. And this is with her dog Boy and Boris. And they're just enjoying the day out there. And I think this is in Pajarito Canyon. And I thought it was a neat little picture of life back then, simple life back then, with your dogs and your horses and out around on a day like this. And then the real thing was for doing this, the story of that this reminds us these places here. This is Oppenheimer House right next door, and that Yuletide. So hopefully that what you've all taken away from this is that even in war there's light, even in isolation generosity exists. Even in remote Mesa of New Mexico, a community can create warmth and strength enough to endure a century that we've been here. The enduring power of love and kindness and giving at Christmas time. This is who we are. This is where we come from, and I hope I've conveyed that and whom we're connected to. And so with that, everybody, I wish you a very Merry Christmas. Thank you for coming out. God bless. Good. Thank you. Thank you, Todd. Thanks, everybody.